On this episode, it's a camshaft swap in a 5.3 LS, made it up to a 4L80 transmission, and it's all dropped into a Roadster Shop chassis. We're going to show you exactly how we do it. Let's go. All right, guys, so I'm over here in the assembly shop, and right behind me, you can see we have the 5.3 LS. This is an LS1. So this is kind of a throwback to the early 2000s motor. So I pulled the valve covers off. I found that it had some aftermarket, totally junk rocker arms. And so it kind of led me on this quest to figure out what was going on with this engine. It's had a rebuild, and I think they used some shoddy parts. So I made a call over to the guys at Brian Tooley Racing. We're gonna run the Truck Norris camshaft. Yes, Truck Norris camshaft. This is kind of like the go-to standard LS cam in all the trucks. It has a nice lumpy idle. It's going to make somewhere around 50 more horsepower to the crank. So in doing that, camshaft, new push rods, we're going to do new rocker arms. We're going to do a new timing chain set because this one is brand new, but it looks so cheap. So we're going to do a double roller timing chain, and then of course all new gaskets and new water pump, new alternator, everything on the exterior of the engine. So this whole thing is fresh. So I'm going to set up the camera and we're going to run through it. Let's go right now. 5.3 LS cam swap. Let's do it. So getting back to basics. Anytime I order a new aftermarket part, I always compare it to the factory originals. This even includes using my calipers to make sure that bearing journals are exact size before I install these parts. As an old shop teacher once told me, you never know who machined your parts at 4:30 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. So you are the best quality control when doing a at-home engine rebuild. So during the cam swap, this is one of the easiest things that you can actually do. Once I have the front of the engine broken down, the cam swap is a simple removal and reinstallation. But be careful as you swap this because you don't want to mar the cam bearings. Of course, use a good assembly engine lube. And then finally, to make things easy on yourself, flip the engine over so you don't risk the lifters dropping down into the pan. Okay, so this is the cam retainer. Here's the old one, and it's got this little embedded gasket. So whenever you pull these off, it's just a good habit to replace them. So we got a couple packages in from Brian Tooley Racing. Oh yeah, there's a new cam plate, JP Performance billet gear set, new hardware for the rockers, and then the best part of all, these are the version 2 is what they refer to them as, and they're so smooth, brand new. That's pretty slick. First thing we need to do is get the timing chain installed and pull the old gear off. Yesterday I did also order a new oil pump. Rarely do the oil pumps on these LS engines go bad. What does go bad is the oil pickup O-ring. So these O-rings go flat, but we've got a new one, and so we'll be fine. But I just, just for safe measure, like we'll just throw the oil pump in there as well. So a little bit different setup. Let's see what they say. I think it'll be all right. First, we'll get this gear off, and then we'll go from there. What a nightmare. The magic of video editing. Everything happens light speed faster than in real time, but that gear definitely gave me a run for my money. It was a nightmare to remove. front end of the engine is all assembled. The cam is in. I've flipped it over, installed the oil pump and the pickup. The next order of business is the timing chain cover. We got the gaskets for that. We got a new crank seal as well. We'll put this together and then we'll start up on the valve train. We'll do a tiny bit on the crank, run that around for the seal. At this point, I've got the lower end of the engine back assembled, the pan back on, the front timing cover back on, so I moved to the top end cylinder heads. So we're swapping valve springs here, and these are from Brian Tooley Racing. Just so I don't bore you guys, this is basically a matched spring to the lift of the camshaft. So give those guys a call at briantooleyracing.com and they'll get you set up for all of your LS needs. So a couple basic tools that you can find off of Amazon. The first one being the valve spring compressor tool. That's exactly what you see here. This is a $20 item on Amazon, so go ahead and purchase that right off the bat. And the second tool that you're going to need is an engine air valve holder. This is a tool that basically allows you to pressurize the cylinder, which in turn keeps your valves pressed tightly up against the valve seats. When doing this, it allows you to separate your valve keepers using the tool and remove the spring and reinstall a new spring and keeper, all without removing your cylinder head. So after quite a bit of repetition, we have the 16 valve springs completed with all new keepers and seals. So next comes the new push rods, again using quite a bit of assembly lube here. I'm a big fan of assembly lube. I feel like once you get all those metal components covered with lube, you don't have to worry. Then comes the new rocker arms from Brian Tooley Racing. Everything is torqued to spec, and there are numerous videos that you can find online that show you the sequence in which to torque down your rocker arm bolts. I'm going to drop a link in the comments below for these assembly videos, which I think are some of the best on YouTube. All right, so here is our 4L80. This is the 4L80E, and pretty heavy-duty transmission. We sent this over to a local rebuilder here, HB Transmission, and they went through it and gave us a full rebuild on this. So full rebuild on it, which is great. We ended up pulling the pan and sending it out to the powder coater, and they powder coated just the outside of it. So we got the pan back, and let's throw that on. And then we'll be able to set this trans back down and fill the converter and install it. So let's do that real quick. So this is a little Roloc wheel from 3M. It's just a little bristle disc is what they call it. And it's just plastic. And there's different hardnesses of this, but this one's great. It's just basically a gasket remover, so that's what I'm using. With the transmission pan freshly back from powder coat, we go ahead and install 12 to 16 pounds is the torque spec here. So we'll get this thing installed. And then after this comes the torque converter. Now, if you've never installed an automatic transmission, you must fill the torque converter with transmission fluid before you install onto the transmission. I recommend at least 2 quarts of fluid in every converter. Now, of course, depending on the overall size of the converter, it may take up to 3. We're ready to install the converter onto the input shaft of the transmission. Now, the big thing to note here, when I'm installing the torque converter, I'm spinning it as I'm giving it pressure towards the transmission. What I'm doing here is waiting for that converter to give me a knock sound that tells me that the little ears are seated onto the input shaft into the pump. So Nigel and I mate these two components together, the engine and the transmission, as we drop them into the Roadster Shop chassis, which is for the 1959 Chevrolet El Camino Project Black Ice. Finally, we're seeing some progress here, and it feels good. Check out that chassis with that beautiful LS engine. The engine and the transmission are finally mated together and mounted inside of that beautiful Roadster Shop chassis. I can't wait to fire this engine up and hear the thump that cam makes. So hey, join us next week. We're gonna set the body down on the chassis and we finally get to see this thing as a complete vehicle. Super pumped on it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next week. What's up everybody, Brian from Mackey's Hot Rod Shop with our YouTube channel, Mackey and Machine. We wanted to say thank you guys for subscribing. The numbers are growing way faster than we ever expected. So a quick overview, we're giving away a box of merchandise for every new 1,000 subscribers. We bundle everybody together, we pick one number, and we send out all this merchandise straight to your door. It's just a way to say thank you, so we really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed, do so now because we're continuing our content in a hot rod shop, bicycles, motorcycles, planes, trains, boats, all of it here on Mackey and Machine. We've got a ton of new content for you guys. The best part of all, real quick, is a 1940 Ford giveaway as soon as we hit 50,000 subscribers. What do you have to do? Hit the subscribe button. That's it. We keep track of everything else. Thank you again. We'll see you on the next one.